We make understanding your money simple. We also make understanding insurance simple. That's why we have Frank Darras. He's the founder of Darras Law. He's an insurance expert, and he's the #1 disability lawyer in the country. The question we pose to you today is, do you have gaps in your insurance policies? Frank, explain the gaps and where they might be.
Sure. All of us are looking at the commercials on TV. 15 seconds saves you 30% on your auto insurance. Problem, if your auto insurance limits, example, you've got $100,000 worth of auto coverage. You hit somebody, you've got $100,000 worth of coverage. You've also got umbrella coverage. The problem is your umbrella coverage doesn't kick in unless you've got $500,000 worth of auto or $300,000 worth of auto. You've got a gap. So you need to be very careful.
Yeah, my great fear was when my son first started driving that he would plow through a school zone, hit 3 kids in the crosswalk, and then all of a sudden I would find out when the lawsuits start piling in, somewhere between the first 100 covered and everything after 500 up to a couple million might be covered, but what happens to the gap in between?
Yeah, and that's the difficulty. People aren't sitting there with a copy of their declarations page from their auto coverage to tell them what their limit is so they can add the umbrella. The umbrella coverage is stupid cheap, about $150 per million. The thing is, we want to stack it right on top of the auto. Got a boat? You want to make sure that the auto or the boat coverage and the umbrella coverage are married so that they sit on top of each other. Have a snowmobile, got a motorcycle, you've got umbrella coverage that sits on top. We want to make sure that they're married and that they stack on top.
And this should be the responsibility of a good agent, right, Frank, to make sure that you have the right coverage, you have those gaps covered, and you have things stacked if, in fact, you can do that to your benefit.
You bet. The problem is that a lot of us are adding coverage online. We see Allstate now, 7.5 seconds is going to save us 40%. So we don't have an agent or a broker sitting across the table. This is just a heads up. If you bought new coverage, make sure that it's seamless. And the second piece of gap insurance is, how many of us are buying a new car, we leased a new car, we financed it for more than 60 months, or we put less than 20% down, or worse, we rolled over an old loan into a new one. We buy that new car, we roll out of the dealership, 2 months later it gets totaled. Gap coverage covers the difference between what you owe and what the car is worth.
And the
That's
reason
true gap coverage.
Yeah, and the one thing we all know about cars, as soon as you drive the car off the lot, it's worth 20% less than it was when it was sitting on the lot.
Gap coverage is super cheap. Let's say your auto premium is $1,400. $500 of it is for collision and comprehensive. Your gap coverage would be 5% of that, about $30 a year.
Frank talked about cars. Let's talk about another potential for gaps. That's homeowners insurance.
You bet. And how many of us have a party, right? We got a bunch of people at our house. You got a balcony. Somebody does the loop-de-loo off the balcony, and before you know it, they're in the hospital, brain injured, and you got a $300,000 homeowner policy, but your umbrella, as we said, doesn't kick in till $500. You got a gap between $300 and $500.
So if you've got a policy and you think you're covered, first ask your agent the question that we posed here this afternoon with Frank Darras from Darras Law, and that is there a gap between my first coverage and my second coverage? If there is, fill it, and then ask yourself why your agent didn't fill it to begin with when they were doing their job. And if you've gone online, remember that quite often one of the ways that premiums get reduced is by reducing the coverage, and it might create a gap, which if you don't know it's there, you won't be able to fill.